I will bring up the deck. Please give me 1 second. There we go. Donnie, I'll hand off to you.
Welcome, everyone. Today's session was Shared Brain, Tips and Tricks for Creating a Delivery Alignment. I will be doing the introduction. My name is Donnie. I'm actually a consultant at eBlocks, lead consultant at eBlocks. And I'll the next slide for me, please, AJ. Okay, so on our agenda, first we'll be doing a welcome. That's 5 minutes. That's really the part we're going through now. We'll do the top takeaways and discussion, so what to expect from a session. Then we'll be going into the main webinar, which is the Shared Brain. We'll embark on a transformative journey to basically give you some tips and tricks on creating delivery alignment and software teams. And our expert speaker, AJ, will guide you through this session. And then lastly, we'll have 10 minutes faculty for questions. Next slide for me, please, AJ. Okay, so just some of our clients, PSG, Straight, Old Mutual, ABSA. You'll see that most of the financial sector is covered there, including Sasfin as well, and a few others. So I think noteworthy mentions there would be CTBTO, the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which we've been working with for the last 2 years. Old Mutual, also a very long-standing client of ours, and ABSA the same. So that's just some of our customers, and if you want to know more, please reach out after the session and we can provide you with more information. Next slide for me. Okay, so some of our services. Firstly, we've got talent solutions. This basically is if you want to supplement your team or if you want a full team, we can assist you there. Platform modernization, that really talks to adaptable infrastructure, services to ensure that your systems are not just up to date, but also ready for whatever comes next. On the DevSecOps side, DevOps and DevSecOps, just to be a little bit more specific, we can take your teams from DevOps into DevSecOps enablement. Cloud migration and cost optimization for those moving into the cloud. Data and analytics, which really speaks to your analytics and advisory services. Then experience design, your UX, UI, data and artificial intelligence is something we specialize in as well, even generative AI. And then agile training services as well. This includes agile coaching for executive level as well as for your teams. Next slide for me, please. Okay, so to introduce you to our speaker, AJ du Plessis will be taking us through the presentation today, through the webinar. He's got about 20 years experience, most of it spent in development and also in agile delivery and agile coaching. He's currently a delivery lead with eBlocks. So over to you, AJ.
Thank you very much, Donnie. So welcome, everyone. I'll be guiding you through some tips and tricks to get your teams aligned on value delivery. Please feel free to interrupt me if you've got any questions on the slides. We do have a 10-minute section at the end where we will cover questions. But if you do have any questions, like I said, please feel free to interrupt. And Donnie or Jenna, if you can just mention to me if somebody does have their hand up while I'm presenting, I can't necessarily see the hands. Okay. So firstly, I wanted to just talk about a little bit of the history around some of the selected agile project frameworks that we do have. So we are going to talk about feature-driven development, test-driven development, the Scrum methodology, and extreme programming. So first, if we look at feature-driven development, this emphasizes on breaking down the project into smaller, manageable features. Focused around domain modeling and understanding and organizing the system's requirements. Also centered around incremental, iterative approach with a strong emphasis on collaboration and accountability for specific features. So as you can see, developing a model, building a feature list, planning by feature, designing by feature, and then building by feature. So everything centered around feature-driven development. Next, we've got test-driven development. So firstly, you'll see we've got writing our test cases, developing our code base, and then running our tests and refining those tests. So more around having test first rather than feature first. And everything is rooted around the test results of feature or test-driven development rather than feature-driven development. Then we have extreme programming. So extreme programming incorporates some of the previous ones that we've spoken about, but this emphasizes engineering practices like pair programming, continuous integration, unit testing, continuous testing. It also promotes frequent releases and customer feedback, and focus on simplicity, communication, and adaptability in development. So much more around standardizing rather than feature development. And lastly, we've got the Scrum process, which is centered around fixed length iterations. Again, iterative development, prioritizing your backlog items and delivers in iterations. And we use roles like Scrum Master, Product Owner, and our development or engineering team. So I'm pretty sure everybody's seen or heard of all these techniques, but at eBlocks, we incorporate quite a few of these principles in our delivery methodology. So again, as I said, I just wanted to set a baseline for what we are trying to achieve from a shared understanding. If the entire team understands where we want to be at, then it's much easier to run the actual deliverables when everybody else understands exactly where we are going with it. As you can see, we've got our product backlog, we've got our iteration backlog, we plan that iteration, have our story desk checks, stand-ups, and we iteratively run these, not just sprint backlogs, but also product increment deliverables. Right, so again, a little bit of history around Agile, what our values are. So firstly, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So we much prefer a conversation than having a tool set necessarily. Again, it's all about driving understanding between the entire team, not just the high-level managers, but all the way down through the engineers, the UI, UX, the testers, for everybody to understand exactly what. Okay, next we've got customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So again, it's all about adding value to our clients rather than organizing and making sure all the contracts are in place before we do get anything done. Right, third, working software over comprehensive documentation. I think this one is rather self-explanatory in the sense that we prefer to rather spend our time and effort making software work and presenting working software rather than just documentation. And responding to change over following a plan. So this does not mean that we do not plan in our agile methodology. It just means that we are much more responsive to be able to change as market conditions or requirements change during the process of a deliverable. And again, even though we've got individuals and interactions, customer collaboration, working software, it does not mean that the secondary items that we mention here are not important. They are just not as important in our delivery methodology. Okay, then we get to our types of mindset that we have in our deliverable methodology. So from research, we've learned that we've got a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So for instance, under the growth mindset, failure is an opportunity to grow. In the fixed mindset, failure is the limit of my abilities. Some of the other examples that we can use is in the fixed mindset, we have, for instance, when people give me feedback, it feels like criticism. But as a growth mindset, we want our teams to adopt and say, I appreciate when people give me feedback, it helps me learn and grow. In a fixed mindset, we might say failure means I'm not capable. In a growth mindset, failure is a chance for me to learn from my mistakes and move forward. Another example of that would be in a fixed mindset, being afraid to admit when I don't know something versus willing to say, I don't know, but I want to learn. Rather than it being a career limiting move, it could actually be a career enhancing move. Any questions up to this point?
Thanks, AJ.
Thank you. All right, then we've got some key principles around the agile mindset. Iterative development, so as I said, time-boxed iterations that we deliver value to our clients. Continuous improvement, making sure that we run certain ceremonies. In some of the later slides, I will cover some of the exercises that we can run around continuous improvement, not just tooling and engineering wise, but also process wise. Always being customer focused, so always having the customer value front of mind, and then empowerment and trust, providing our teams with autonomy to be able to make decisions that they can take on their own without having to resort back to the management team and waiting necessarily and creating delays in the process. All right, so next we'll get into some of the essential skills or soft skills for Agile. Effective communication, giving and receiving feedback, teamwork and collaboration, conflict resolution, empathy and emotional intelligence. So the first tip that we'd like to share is giving and receiving feedback. So being specific, what did you like? What did you not like when giving and receiving feedback? So next we look at behavior. So let's focus on behavior and not somebody's personality necessarily. Attack the problem, not the person. Using the I statement. So expressing your opinion in stating, rather than you did X, Y, and Z, to change that statement to I feel like X, Y, and Z happened. And then listening actively. So let's not interrupt each other while we are giving or receiving feedback, and asking clarifying questions to make sure that we understand the problem behind the scenes. Okay, second tip. So teamwork and collaboration. So being respectful, treating ourselves and each other with respect and professionalism in all communications, whether that's in Teams, emails, in meetings, making sure that we have mutual consideration. Being accountable, so taking ownership of your work and your actions. Being flexible, so be open to new ideas and the willingness to adapt to changing circumstances. And being proactive. I think this is overlooked in quite a few scenarios where it comes to team autonomy. Being proactive and thinking about problems and solving problems before the entire team necessarily understands exactly what the problem is, and being able to transfer that knowledge and taking the initiative, I think goes a long way in showing commitment to a team. Okay, next we get to techniques for improving teamwork. So diversified teams. So what we'd like to create in a delivery methodology is having a diversified team of knowledge, not just from a a seniority perspective, but also from a technology and engineering perspective. So having different-minded people, not all like-minded, not all thinking in the same manner, usually leads to better solutions. So next we've got defined roles, and rather than having defined roles, we have a shared outcome as a team. As I spoke earlier as well, autonomy and decision making. So providing the team with the freedom to make their own decisions on the deliverables at hand. And this sounds easier said than done, but trusting in the team and, as we discussed earlier, taking responsibility allows the team to start trusting each other and creating a shared understanding. And then manage team meetings. So some of the things that we can do to manage meetings a little bit better is developing meeting agendas. So what are the outcomes of certain meetings? Rather than having a meeting for the sake of having a meeting, if everything has an outcome, that usually drives the conversations a lot better in the meetings as well. Being on time and being ready for the meeting start time. So either joining a few minutes early, making sure all the technology works, respecting the time constraints, not running over, making sure that we don't encroach on people's calendars. They might have other meetings as well. And then also for hybrid or online meetings, having a set of ground rules usually ensures that a team agrees to what is the etiquette around, for instance, having our cameras on at all times, or making sure that there is no background noise, muting when you are not speaking, those type of things. And then also having reserved time for QA in meetings, for instance. Right, and then the last tip for improving teamwork is learning opportunities. So we will not only enhance teamwork skills, but also increase employees' engagement and job satisfaction. So whether that's formal training or informal training in guidance or pairing, what we have seen is that these techniques being implemented on a daily basis improves teamwork and team cohesion. Next, we've got some communication barriers and how to get across them. So physical barriers, cultural barriers, language barriers, or interpersonal barriers. And how to address some of these barriers. So firstly, I think technology can be a great tool to overcome some of these barriers that we face. But again, setting the ground rules on what the expectations are when using these tools is critically important in addressing these communication barriers. So, for instance, if we set up a meeting, nobody joins within 10 minutes, then the meeting either needs to be postponed or escalated to get everybody involved. We also need to look at some of the cultural competencies that we can be aware of. So, for instance, learning about different cultures in the language. The meaning of certain words can get lost literally in translation, rather than being spoken to in your native language. We need to be aware that other languages might come into play. We've also got looking at things like non-verbal communication. So as you can see here, paying attention to body language, facial expressions, the tone of voice, cultural differences. And yeah, I just wanted to speak to some of these in a little bit more detail. So practicing empathy. So trying to understand the position that your peer is in, and not just junior versus senior, but also from a cultural perspective, a family perspective, and making sure that we take those considerations into account when we do communicate with each other. Right, and again, as I mentioned previously, it's listening actively and being respectful, and also seeking feedback. As the growth mindset, we want to learn from each other and grow from that rather than criticize each other. Okay. So one of the things that while doing research for this webinar is signs and symbols, for instance, in nonverbal communication, that in the Western world, a thumbs up is usually regarded as a sign of approval. But I recently learned that in Bangladesh, it's actually a very bad insult to give somebody a thumbs up. So being aware of those type of cultural differences can make a big difference in how teams communicate and value each other. Right, then not just the communication barriers, we also have some key concepts for the agile working environment. So having an open and collaborative space where teams can easily connect with each other, dedicated spaces for agile ceremonies. So for our scrums, or stand-ups, our retros, our planning sessions, having dedicated spaces for those ceremonies is critical to the communication challenges. And then having comfortable and ergonomic furniture and access to technology and tools. So making sure everybody's logged in, everybody can access the Teams chat or the Zoom chat, whatever technology we are using. And as you can see, as part of the continuous improvement cycle, there are many different tool sets that we can use to collaborate. And as a company that has consulted to many of the financial institutions, we have experience in a vast range of tooling as well. Right, then we get to collaboration techniques. See, my animation's not 100%, but we can go through that. Before I actually get to collaboration techniques, is there any questions, any comments at this point? Yep.
No, man.
Right, so we'll go through some of the collaboration techniques. Pair programming. So what this means is two engineers working together on a problem. Not just does this potentially increase the velocity at which we can solve problems, but it also creates key or avoids key man dependencies. Then what we have next is mob programming, where we have a few engineers and cross-functional team members working together on a problem. On one of the contracts or one of the engagements that we just had with the client, we actually had our internal team and the client team working together for about 3 hours to resolve a massive blocker. And within those 3 hours, we were able to resolve something that individually as team members, we weren't able to resolve for almost 2 weeks. Next, we've got code reviews. So having our peers review our code, making sure that we apply all of our standards, our logic, our processes, everything being reviewed before we are committing to our main branching. Our daily stand-up, critical ceremony for us, and where we talk about what we did yesterday, what we are busy with today, and where there are any blockers, whether the team can help and what needs to be unblocked. Also, we've got a retrospective at the end of our iteration where we look back and we say what went well, what didn't go well, what can we improve. There's quite a few different techniques of running retrospectives, but the main point is that it's a safe space for the delivery team to voice any concerns or things that we can do better. And then lastly, we've got cross-functional teams, which is having people of different disciplines, making sure that we are aligned to our delivery goals, the standards that we need to keep, and that we've set as a team. Okay. Any questions around this? Because I think this is probably one of the most important things, even though soft skills are important, but those are things that come over time. These are things that we can implement immediately that will improve collaboration and shared understanding between teams. So any questions around the actual implementations of these?
All right.
All good. Right, then some more shared understanding techniques. Having user stories. So these are self-contained pieces of functionality that adds value directly to the client. And if you do have any questions around user stories and how to write them, I've got a couple of examples coming up as well. But we also talk about horizontal and vertical slicing and making sure that a story is self-contained and adds value just by itself. A story could be part of a bigger feature, but it's critically important to convey information to the engineers and the delivery team around what exactly is it that we're delivering. Secondly, we've got visual boards. So either DevOps, or Jira, or Trello, or a physical board, but making sure that whatever we are busy with, especially for stand-ups and retrospectives, that everybody is aware of who's doing what, and we have a visual representation of that. Making sure that we're sharing that knowledge. If one person is not available, we at least know that other people can pick that up. Then continuous integration and deployment. So these are our deployment pipelines, our integration pipelines, our build pipelines, making sure that we automate as much of that as possible, that any future development is automatically tested before deploying into either our production or our staging environments. Then agile modeling, so making sure that we've got the cadence set up. As you can see, there's planning, there's the daily stand-up, there's the retrospective, the showcase to the client, and making sure that everybody understands what that cadence is and what is the point of each of those meetings. What is the outcome that we require from each of these? Okay, and then being iterative and repeating those processes, making them more efficient. And lastly, we've got story mapping. So providing a better visualization of our customer's journey, and it encompasses all the tasks that are related that a user of the system would normally complete. And again, we've got quite a bit of information around story mapping, user journey mapping, roles, and understanding how to document that back into a story.
AJ, before you continue, there's a question in the chat that says, what is your view on running stand-ups without a board?
So my personal experience of running a stand-up without a board is that it works for 1 or 2 days in a row, but any longer period than that, it becomes very difficult to remember who was doing what. If we, on a Friday, for instance, what was Jenna busy with on Monday? Have you completed all those tasks? So my opinion would be to almost never have your stand-ups without a visual board. May I just inquire where that question comes from and get a little bit more background?
AJ, the question came from Dion, so I don't know if Dion would like to comment on that.
Yeah, I can comment on it. I think the question really came from sometimes, I mean, there's obviously times when stand-up is really quick and you need to give an update, but I think I can kind of relate to what you're saying in terms of value of progress when you do stand-ups without it.
Yeah, and Dion, I think the biggest thing for me is just making sure that we don't lose any of the items. And if we don't have a visual board around stand-up, then it, yeah, like I said, for a day or two, I'm sure that teams can get by without a visual board. But if it takes any longer than that, we might forget about tasks that we've put on to ourselves and not gone back to. So for me, it's critical to have visual boards in our stand-ups. Okay. Any other questions before I continue? No? Thank you. All right, so as you can see, this is just a sample of how eBlocks would do a user story. You can see we've got certain notation that we use, preconditions, and then most importantly, the acceptance criteria. And as I mentioned, for a user story being a standalone piece of delivery that can be delivered, tested, and pushed through the delivery pipeline. If you do have any questions around how to structure stories and break them down, we will provide some contact details at the end of the webinar where we can then engage with you individually to make sure that we get through these. Then an example of a Scrum board. So for instance, you can see we've got ready for dev, NQA, UAT, and done. Now, a portion of what we said earlier as part of our visual boards, a done, there's also something we need to talk about around the definition of done. So a story might be done in a certain environment where if the development is done and the business user is tested, it is deemed complete. In other environments, we might see that the team agrees that done means that it's part of a build pipeline. It has unit tests, it has automation tests, it has been tested by the feature tester and deployed to the production environment, for instance. So defining that done column or any column on our visual boards is important for the team to decide what those columns are going to be. Again, eBlocks can assist with helping you figure out what those should look like for your individual needs, but it is critically important when giving feedback against those certain columns. And then just a sample of the story mapping. So for instance, as you can see, creating a user and at an epic level, then we have the language, the details. Each one of these would be stories underneath a feature. So mapping these stories into journeys and features that need to be delivered. Okay, Jenna, if you will just share with us in the chat any or all the feedback options that we do have. And we've also got a feedback survey. If everybody would please log on there, give us a little bit of feedback around whether you found the webinar useful and whether you'd like to join us for the next webinar, which will be Breaking Stagnation, Navigating Your DevSecOps Maturity. And we've got a link here that Jenna will also post in the chat.
AJ?
Yes, Lyle.
I have a question. So earlier you mentioned um vertical and horizontal slices. That one caught me.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. Can you maybe elaborate on what a horizontal slice is?
Okay, so I'm going to cover this rather briefly, but we do have quite a few write-ups around this as well, Lyle. But what we mean with horizontal versus vertical slicing is a horizontal slicing of, let's take login, for instance. Horizontal slicing might say, all right, develop the front end, then develop the integration layer, then develop the database layer as 3 separate deliverables. Whereas we at eBlocks in our delivery principles state that we should deliver value rather than just stories or pieces of tech, rather, right? So a vertical slice story would say, have the front end developed with the integration, speaking to the database, and clicking login. The validations, for instance, could be another story, but that's the difference between horizontal and vertical slicing. And I'm happy to even put together a bit of a session around that. Does
Okay,
that answer,
cool.
does that answer your question, Lyle?
Cool. Yeah, thanks, AJ.
Okay. Jenna, I'm not sure, did you post the feedback notes?
Yes, AJ, I did post it in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions? I think we went a little bit quicker than expected, so we've got about 18 minutes for Q&A.
AJ, I have a question. You did touch up on the different agile frameworks like test-driven, feature-driven, extreme programming, and Scrum methodology. Which of the 4 would you recommend to be the best practice?
So I don't think it's a single methodology that works best. At eBlocks, we have developed a hybrid of those. So for instance, anybody that's worked on a project with us, you'll understand that we use portions of extreme programming, but not just extreme programming. We incorporate that into the Scrum methodology. And that's why I put it right up front from a history perspective and just understand what the methodologies are. And at eBlocks, we've created a hybrid of taking all the best portions of each of those methodologies and put them into our deliverable methodology at eBlocks. Again, there's also something to be mentioned that there's no silver bullet, right? There's no single methodology that's going to work for every single project. We need to evaluate what is the best approach for each of the clients and each of their individual needs. Okay.
Yeah, understood.
Okay, happy. Right, anything else? Any other questions? As mentioned.
One last one.
Yeah, go for it, Lyle.
So the IC Agile that we've been accredited, right? The IC Agile course. Are you guys going to do one internally? You and Jenna for like the whole team?
Yes, we can run the course internally, so you can actually get accreditations. And it will be a diploma that eBlocks will provide you.
Okay, is that going forward?
Correct. This will be the same diploma that we would provide to a client that joins our IC Agile Fundamentals or one of the other courses that will be available shortly.
Okay. Okay, cool.
All right, guys. Now I just wanted to make sure that everybody's seen in the chat. We've got a feedback link. If you'll please log on and provide some feedback around the webinar that you attended today. We've also got some registration link for our next webinar, and then complimentary agile assessment if required. You can contact us at hello@eblocks, and we'll promptly assist you and see where we can help out. Okay, so yeah, that's the end of the webinar from my side, ladies and gents. Thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Donnie, Dion, I don't know if you guys want to add anything to the end. Yeah.
No, I think this is the content was really good. Thank you. I think the structure in terms of the feedback forms and the links, I think that's also very good. I think